Solihullradio.com.
Now, intelligence forums. What is intelligence forums? Some of you will know very well. Some of you think, what is this thing that Tony's just wrote me into? And intelligence forum is a networking platform that exists within London, within
Leeds, Birmingham, and Bristol,
and Solihull.
And Solihull.
And so, in my capacity as general manager at Touchwood here, I help Harry look after the Solihull branch. It's a subscription networking event, but we always let you come along, try a couple out, see what you think, see if it's worked for you. It's not like a regular networking dating service where you just say who you are and what you're looking for. We try and make it a bit more interesting by having either a round table debate, or maybe we get in a guest speaker to talk to everybody. And it is a real mixture of different types of business around the table. And for me, I find the most interesting networking event that we get. Well, I'm only saying that because you're sitting next to me, Harry. No, I'm joking. So you're all very welcome today. We will go around the table and give you a chance to let everybody know who you are and what you do. But I think it's very rare that you do business with somebody that you don't like or don't have any rapport with, and that's why I think these sessions are really good, because you get a chance to find out a bit about people and their views on things. No least today, when we're going to be talking about our little, an article in the press for us to have a chat around the table about. But let's do those introductions first of all. Tony Elvin, General Manager at Touchwood.
Harry Corbett, Intelligence Forums, and good afternoon and lovely to be here.
Pete and I, new General Manager at the Village Hotel.
So you remember we had a really good session at the Village, could be 6-9 months ago now, but
before my
got a chance to see the facilities, but it's something that's getting better all the time as well.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Brilliant.
Okay, good afternoon, my name's Asif Mukhtar. It's my third meeting. I'm from a clinic called Vanity Clinic, based over in Solihull.
Peter Hall from Edge Creative. We're an independent creative design and marketing agency.
Geraldine Davies, Senior Care Support Services. I'm an independent care advocate working with older adults, looking for the right care for them.
Hello, I'm Mukesh Kumar. I run an organisation called Art at the Heart, community interest company, and we offer art clubs and classes and art for well-being for groups of all ages.
Bonnie Parts from Morgan Parts Recruitment. We do temporary to senior management recruitment. Very different philosophy as we have no targets and no commission for our consultants.
Tom O'Brien from Tom Wrote It. I'm a copywriter. Anything you want, blogs, press releases, all sector. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeff O'Brien. I run Solihull Radio here in central Solihull.
Hello, Angela Riesbeck. I'm an independent self-employed travel agent.
Hello, Veronica Mast. I'm a resale consultant for Intelligent Forums and a lecturer and an artist.
Steve Evans, 7-star photography. Do all sorts of photography, personal, private, corporate, commercial.
Hi, I'm Richard Davies from Rich Creative Media. I'm a graphic designer and social media manager.
Brilliant, thank you. So, I don't know how many of you had a chance to have a little look at what you might want to talk about today. And do we set a little bit of a time on each discussion?
Well, we need to do it in the hour.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a question of judging the time.
Shall I get us kicked off with one?
I think it's a really good idea.
So, I saw an article about lots of protests about the taxi go slow in Birmingham. Obviously, recently we had the climate change protesters managed to camp out with tents and obstacles in the middle of Oxford Circus, and there was a lot of talk about, it's all well and good, it's right to protest, but not if it's going to get in people's way and disrupt them and make them late for work. And I just thought, there's people protesting, forget what that one was particularly about, but I guess in this case there were people protesting about the world might end and there'll be no life left for our grandchildren, and people worried they're going to be 10 minutes late for work. And I just thought, where does appropriate protest finish and over disruption or things that are too disruptive begin? what are your thoughts on that? And you know, we're pretty, you know, in other countries you might be shut down straight away for protesting and not having not being allowed to share an opinion. And we're lucky in this country that we have the liberty to be able to say what we think. But where does the line get drawn before the police come in and move it all away?
I think I'll go first as the new boy, but I think freedom of speech is brilliant, and I think that's great. But I think the recent protests that have happened in London and at the airports and whatever, especially over the bank holiday weekend, where people are taking families abroad and whatnot, I think does cross a line. I don't know where the right line is, but I think there was an example where it was a family's first holiday for 5 or 6 years, and they're getting stuck in airports because flights can't go out. And I think at that point, the actual cause of the protest gets lost, and then I think people end up talking about the disruption more than the actual cause of the protest, and then I think people actually forget the cause if we're not careful.
Do you think if that disruption hadn't gone beyond a certain point, I'm not saying you're wrong, but just to throw it out there, that we might not even know that the protest had taken place unless you walk past it?
I think there's a fine line there, to be honest, and I think they were in danger. In fact, I think they got to the point where any public sympathy for the cause was being lost, in all honesty. Yeah. Because I think it was a bit over gluing yourself to tube trains, you know, and blocking some of the main bridges. Everybody knows what London's like. It's difficult enough to move around at the best of times. And to block some of the bridges and to stop people who are just ordinary people trying to go to work, living their everyday lives, means that you'll quickly lose any popular support you may have gained in the first place.
Should Emily Pankhurst have just waved the scarf in front of the horse?
It was a slightly different world then, though, Tony, I think.
I think it's an incredibly difficult one, isn't it? Because people's businesses, you know, that are running on a fine line are being perhaps threatened. But there again, it's a big issue, climate change. When I was in London trying to cross the Waterloo Bridge, which I could on foot, so that was all right, but the traffic couldn't. It was conscious to me there was a lot of people on the bridge protesting that didn't look under any remote pressure regarding work.
Yeah.
Bottles of water. I think you have to think that
the water.
The taxi situation. I was trying to get through Birmingham, not realising what was going on, thinking, why can't I move? And I understand, obviously, everybody's got a living to make. My concern was I was stuck in traffic for an hour in town, and there was an ambulance that equally couldn't get through. The blue light was going, and I thought, that's somebody's family. Potentially, you know, we've all got a right to say what we need to say, and a freedom of speech, 100%. You don't have to be naked to do that. Sometimes you think it's attention seeking as opposed to getting your point across. But as I said, I couldn't get through time, and this ambulance equally couldn't get through time, which is a major concern.
I think there has to be the disruption element. It's like great advertising. Something has to grab the attention in the first place. Otherwise, we just simply walk past.
Yes, I definitely agree. I don't know what it is on the weekend. The Bakerloo line was closed because of disruption, and you know I was going for my partner's birthday, so it was a real. I was thinking, are we protesting? Is it why is it closed? There's no acknowledgement. I had no idea why. I had no idea. Other than the fact that I couldn't get anywhere.
I know in the past, when I've worked for another hotel company, who like to do things a bit controversial sometimes. When they refurbished their Manchester hotel, they had pictures of naked male and female builders with hard hats and sledgehammers and all the rest of it, with just carefully placed black and yellow tape to cover the rude bits. Because they knew that once it had got up there and everyone had complained about it, they'd have to take it down. But it was the story of it getting taken down that got them all the PR they needed, rather than just the people that had see it. I guess that's not stopping anyone from getting anywhere. That's a question of taste.
I think one thing that did come out of it was there was a debate. You read about it in the newspapers, you heard it on the news, social media. Who was involved in it? You know, there were quite a number of celebrities that were involved in it, and what is their carbon footprint? And then afterwards, it showed all the bottles and all the rubbish that was piled up afterwards. And I thought that was quite a damning effect. That the media tended to play it down and be quite negative about it, rather than actually, as a country, I think we're not there yet, anywhere near there yet. But I think with the type of programmes we've all been watching on the television with David Attenborough and the Blue Planet and all of this, we are becoming far more aware of what is going on. And I think we are one of the countries at the forefront. And I think some of the other countries, when they're protesting about what we're doing and what we're not doing, as I say, we've got a long way to go yet, but we are doing so much, whereas there's so many other countries that are doing very, very little, and I just think they needed to protest, but I just felt it. Perhaps the protest could have been in a different way after a period of time.
Subsequent to that, Theresa May's looking to adjust the time limits and when things will be achieved by. And Michael Gove actually met with them as well, didn't he? So did it achieve something? Maybe?
Yep. But just to pick up on that point, though, Tony, about us being nowhere near the worst in terms of pollution. What struck me about the process in London is that the countries who are renowned for having the worst record, countries like America and China and India, their embassies, they didn't go and protest outside their embassies, the countries that are the worst polluters. They disrupted us.
Countries probably wouldn't have allowed that protest to happen either, would they? It's interesting. Pete, you've got a newspaper clipping in front of you there.
Dr. Mass has got one point. It's going to be good.
Oh, go on, Dr. Mass.
No, I was going to say that the fact that there are people thinking about that they got late to their jobs, and when we compare that towards the fact that the planet Earth is in danger, it's just bizarre that someone can just put those two. Yes, and that is epitomizes the fact that people don't understand how important it is, the climate change. Not yet.
The biggest thing said about David Attenborough, the mother whale with the baby whale in the plastic bag has done more in this country than someone standing being naked protesting. That element, that human nature element, affected everybody that I knew because it's so poignant. And that changed everybody's thought process about plastic in this country. You don't necessarily need to disrupt. There's a balance, isn't there? Like anything's always the balance.
I think the best sort of protest that I've ever known was John Lennon's peace protests in the late 60s, where he did bed-ins, which was like amazing publicity. And it didn't actually disrupt people, but it actually drew everybody's attention to that.
It was interesting enough, wasn't it?
Interesting, yeah.
It's always a story, isn't it? Everybody will be always attached to a story of some description. Like David Attenborough, for instance. Human element. Human element is always get through everybody.
Yeah.
Pete, you've got a newspaper clipping in front of you there. What story did you bring to the table?
It's something that really pisses me off, excuse me. And
it's turned into 101.
Well, it does, and it's why I think it's one of the reasons why people are starting to lose faith in the justice system in this country. And it's a fella in Leicester, small business owner, who owns a beauty salon, women's beauty treatments, hairdressing salon, etc. Got broke into, not for the first time. When he'd been broken into previously, he had extra security put in, including CCTV. He's given to the police CCTV footage of these lads breaking in. He's got still clear images of these lads breaking in. Thankfully, they've cut themselves, I hope very badly, so there's blood left everywhere. The police have said there's not enough evidence to proceed with the prosecution. Now, I mean, what is the point? What is the point of having any security if you can basically show the coppers, these are the fellas, here they are doing it, here are their blood samples, and they don't get nicked for it. And I think, we've all come to the situation there where you think, well, if you get burgled or your business premise gets broken into or your car gets nicked or something, you only ring the old bill to get a crime number for your insurance. Because you know nothing's going to happen. And I think, there's almost becoming a general acceptance now that, well, I've got to ring the police, they won't come out, they won't catch the people, but I'll need a crime reference number or my insurance won't pay out. And I mean, that cannot be much clearer evidence. Here they are, yes, this is us doing it, and we're going to walk away scot-free. And it drives me mad, stuff like this. Sorry, but it does.
I've got some experience of speaking to the police on a regular basis, and not through any of my own misdemeanors, not for a good few years now, anyway. And you know, we might. The difficulty is there just aren't the police officers. It's not that they don't want to come; they just.
But they haven't had to catch those people, Tony.
No.
Here they are.
But they literally, there are not. And they would say
to be
probably
fair,
that level of crime isn't high enough. Which
to be
we would
fair,
all disagree with. But
that's not the police. I'm not blaming the police.
Yeah.
It's the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yeah.
I have sympathy sometimes with the police because the police want these people nicked.
Yeah.
And the CPS say there's not enough evidence. How much more evidence do you need?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Isn't there another problem with the prisons being sort of chocker full as well?
No, in that case, I mean, what we're going to do is let everybody off it.
No,
but that is another. You know, we're running out of prison space. The prisons are overcrowded.
They'll put you in prison. They'll put you in prison for not paying your television line.
Yeah.
Or your council tax.
I think all of this goes back to us cutting corners in public spending in all sorts of things, whether it's those youths at an influential point of their lives that they could have, I don't know, some of the stuff you do, Mukesh, is with, you know, engaging with young people so that they have something to occupy their brains and rather than finding something to do, which we don't really want them doing, you know.
But I think it's also about maybe the consequences of impunity that a little bit in the long term, because it's about maybe in the next generation. If in this generation people start getting off with murder, then it's the next generation that will have an impact in terms of, see, nobody's caught for the crime.
Yeah.
So this happens in Argentina with tax paying, like nobody pays, and then if there is no punishment, actually you are actually rewarded. You pay less when you don't pay in time, eventually. And that has an impact, so people then eventually don't pay because they know that is. So the longer and more relevant impact that has the impunity, it's something to think about when we need to have a society that is fair, and that when someone commits a crime, it needs to be punished.
I think, like Tony, I seem to follow you around hotels, I've just realised, but I've also worked at another hotel where Tony worked before in Dudley, and quite a different area demographically as well, isn't it? But very similar issues to what you just said there, especially around car crime. So it's massive in the West Midlands, especially if you're on the M6 or M5 corridor. And we would some weeks have 6 or 7 car crimes, van break-ins, high-end cars stolen. Often it would appear through CCTV that these were very young, perhaps under 16, you know, so very, very young indeed. Evidence-wise, as probably clear as what a hotel could get, you know, registration number, visuals, but again, nothing happens with it, and it gets to the stage where we was actually told, because of the volumes of crime we was having, that we should stop ringing, and that we should log it online through a designated forum to do it. Then what they do, they have, I'd like to say clerical, but certainly not front-facing police, come out and offer technical solutions to you getting on top of car crime yourself, such as barriers or something like that. For anyone who knows Village, the actual throughput of cars a day is astonishing. So we have approximately 1,000 people a day swipe through a leisure club, so to start putting barriers up logistically is not that easy. But I think you're right, that there's no fear of actually of getting caught, and whilst there isn't a fear of getting caught, and I don't think that necessarily means time in prison, whether it's community service or fines or whatever it is,
you at least go and visit them.
Whilst there's no fear, they keep coming back, and they come back, and they come back.
Because they know they'll get away with it.
Yeah, if they know they get away with it, it's going to spread.
And it's what we've seen over the years.
On technicalities. They get off on technicalities and they know the loopholes.
The effect grows, I think, though, because one of our biggest clients in Dudley was Western Power, and they were getting a lot of their vans broken into. And it will come down to a stage where they will not want to use hotel accommodation in that area. That's probably £500,000 to £600,000 a year, and they will make a choice that they cannot physically stay in that area. The ramifications of that are obviously very significant.
What,
I don't know. Sorry, go on.
What would be interesting is to know, say for example, if the owner did try to defend himself that particular day, then it would be a completely different matter altogether. But then the police would be involved and said, you can't do that. Because
there has been a case only in the papers this week, last week, that guy that did defend himself, a 79-year-old pensioner that defended himself with a knife.
Yes.
And actually it went in his favour, but he was so frightened he's had to have a new identity. He and his wife have had to move to a different part of the country, totally new identity, because it was travellers that had broken in, and they have this huge network of other travellers, and his life was at risk, and his family's life. But for a change, he actually, the law went on his side for I'm not condoning stabbings, but he actually somebody had broken into his own home, and he defended himself, and it went in his favour for a change. But actually, he's now been penalised because he's having to move and change identity. I just think the whole police service, my son is a policeman, and he's been in the police service for a number of years, and he is sick and tired of being a policeman because he said they get no support. The policing levels under Theresa May, sorry, we're political here, but under Theresa May when she was Home Secretary, just absolutely scaled it back so badly. And he said, and that has major repercussions of having police on the ground doing what they should be doing, and actually they just haven't got the police to be policemen anymore, and everyone's against them because of that reason.
I guess that what we're saying also is, apart from the emotional effect of the elderly gentleman having to defend himself, there's a huge cost to relocating him and his wife and all of this, the potential £500,000.
I think there's another thing to think about, just coming back to the video footage. There's kind of expectations of people that we need to somehow look at differently, because we've had to report a crime that happened on our front garden and all the rest of it, and the police came and said, look, you've got to get a video camera put in. So we got a video camera put in. They said that will be really useful for evidence. So it happened again. We kind of submitted it, and then they couldn't do anything, even though it was video evidence, etc. It's just the time and it's the effort, and they haven't got the resources. And I think it does force you into kind of start to think about your expectations and start managing those differently, because we're not going to get that kind of support. Here's the evidence, go and arrest this person. It's not going to happen. But I think it is about engaging somehow with those people that are committing these crimes, or somehow we've got to get into engaging to change that behaviour, because that's the greatest weapon we've got, and somehow we've got to use it more effectively.
What you are finding in local villages or small towns, they're actually setting up their own, not necessarily vigilante groups, but they're setting up their own groups to patrol their own villages and towns, because they haven't got the policing there to support them.
Something that's getting quite popular now is, it's quite commonplace for a town to have a bid, or a particular area in a city. You've now got bids appearing in housing communities, and the residents are all clubbing together to pay for security and things like that, to try and take matters into their own hands, really, or prevent things, make them happen somewhere else more likely.
I think that's the way it's going to go. Yeah. Fundamentally,
it's about why there's an action to a reaction. Why in the first instance are these people thinking it's acceptable to behave like that? Is that down to family values, education, social infrastructure? There's a reason why. So rather than just the actual dealing with them, send them to prison or whatever, it's the cause, isn't it? And dealing with that fundamentals on the ground.
No, I think you're right, absolutely.
I think it is very important that the CCTV is accompanied of the real support, because otherwise, originally it was set up to kind of skirt, oh, this is CCTV, so okay. But if people start thinking that is not, oh, it doesn't matter because they're not going to do anything with it anyway, the power of the CCTV to prevent is gonna disappear. That's
more CCTV per head of person in the UK than any other country in the world already. So,
but if it's not supported by a real punishment after that, then it's going to lose its real power.
I think there's too many loopholes in it as well, perhaps, isn't there? Such as, I go back to talking about car crime. We had these ANPR cameras installed so it would recognise number plates, but that's only relevant if they've not changed the number plates on the car in the first place. So then you spent all this money, car comes and, oh no, that's not the right registration plate, and at that point it's, right, was that a good use of money?
Okay, next subject. Who'd like to go next and share this story?
Yeah, come on, don't be shy.
Mine probably aren't that interesting because I'm not very good at reading full newspapers like the rest of you, so I combine mine into a full week. But what I find interesting this week is, are we becoming a cashless society, which I thought was a good one for debate. So in 1 week, free ATMs are now disappearing very fast. We're having more and more bank closures, so the ability to get cash seems to be getting more and more difficult, whilst merchant fees are going up as well for businesses with card payments. But then in the same week, the Treasury announced that the 1 and 2p coin have been saved for the benefits of charity.
So what do we think? And is it a good or bad thing as well?
I think the lady that deals with elder people might have something to say on that topic.
I think where I was going to come at it was... it's like the closures of post offices and banks, and for older people that live out in the sticks and perhaps can't get out into towns, it's part of their social life. They become more and more isolated in their life, and to be able to go into a post. In fact, I read today, maybe I'm a little bit behind the times here, but Solihull post office is closing. And that's probably quite old news, but I'd only read about it.
I think it's in the last 7 days.
I heard that.
Oh, did you? Well, I've only seen it. I've only seen it in the press. And for older people, they're closing things like day centres, post office, banks, and ATMs. And a lot of older people can't use ATMs. They're still in the mindset of cash and using money in their pockets, and you say 2p's and 1p's, and it's just it's the impact it's going to have on them going forward. But I think it's a bigger picture than just closing ATMs.
As I said last month about technology taking over jobs. Prime example that if that happens, how many jobs are going to be lost in this country because of it?
I mean, you go in a bank and you've got one guy that stands there as the customer service man, just sort of twiddling his thumbs while everyone goes in and uses the machines. Banking has changed beyond recognition today. There's not your friendly bank manager, or maybe not so friendly, depending on what you wanted. But there's not. We have moved on, and we are becoming more just technology is taking over our lives. And
That's a good point. Just to put that into perspective, we announced on our social media about the story regarding the post office, and we've had lots and lots of comments from listeners and followers of the station that it may even be moved upstairs in W.H. Smith's. So there's hoo-ha on, getting up and down the lifts and things for elderly or people with disability and limited mobility. And they've got that prime location there, haven't they, in the corner of Mill Square, sloped access and
prime spot, isn't it?
Spot. And what's happening regarding the sorting office at the back and all of those sort of things? Is that that still going to continue? Are we still, we go home every day and we get a red card saying, and we tried to deliver something into your thing today. No, they didn't.
No.
They put the red card in. So you have to come back and find a space. But I agree. There is a lot of outcry and things like that.
It's difficult for older people. I mean, my mother's 85, and she will only ever deal in cash. She'd never dream of going to Tesco's and using some sort of card. She wouldn't know how to, I don't think, to be perfectly honest.
Or even remember their PIN number.
Yeah.
With some people.
Will merchants, will the limits go up? It's currently £30, isn't it?
Contactless.
For contactless. It used to be less than that, didn't it?
$20, wasn't it?
Sure, have to, but already if you're paying with your phone, like Apple Pay, you're using a fingerprint, it's the same as just paying on the card.
So there's no
contactless in that case doesn't hold a £30.
No.
I think that for benefit, because I went to the supermarket, did the weekly shop, forgot my wallet, and I got to the till and I was like, it all scanned through, and I went, different jacket, and the guy behind, look, he was a young kid behind the till, and he says, have you got your phone on you? And I went, yeah. He went, have you got your card on it? I said, yeah. He's like, exactly. And literally I just beeped it, it's in my face, and just paid, and it's like, wow. It's great. So
I think with the generation
Yeah.
that's coming along now, we will become less and less, using cash. We will become a cashless society. But I think it's as you phase that out, and the impact of who it has an impact on as you phase it out.
That is true.
The problem with that though is that I've got 2 children, 20 and 22, who have no concept of budgeting. So my daughter said the other week she went out and came back. She said, I think my card's been cloned. Has it? Oh my God. She's looked through a bank statement. Actually, no, I went there and I went there and I went there. So they have no because it's just so easy. There's no way of being able to sort of budget them.
It's not like spending real money.
No, it isn't. So she thought her
card.
card. She was overdrawn and was devastated. She thought her card had been cloned. No, she had too much to drink around town, and then realised where she'd been.
That is a problem, isn't it? And also, what about fraud? Is that a problem?
I think with fingerprint technology to pay for things, actually, the reason to drive for that, it will reduce it.
Okay.
There's talk, isn't there, if you've got a contactless payment, someone can walk past you in a queue for something and get 30. At least that's why that's limited to £30, because so that people can't just do it. Put the card payment machine on your pocket.
People sell things now, don't they? That go inside the wallet to block it so you can't do it. Like a film that,
We'll all need card holders like that. Metal card holders. Can they go through metal cases? Can they scan through a metal case?
Probably not. I would think that's pretty safe.
I haven't got my cards in here. I've only got my business cards on, so it's only got business cards. But going on to the thing about fraud, certainly in the travel industry, every day I probably get 2 or 3 emails saying you need to up your security on your email, because every single transaction that goes through my business, I've never taken cash in the years that I've been in the travel industry, and people know that there are credit card numbers floating around in the ether, and some people are still of the opinion that they can email a credit card number with the PIN number and also the expiry date, and just expect, in all honesty and naivety, that is just going to get to the recipient correctly. But what they don't realise, there's so much cyber sort of fraud going on. I think every single day I get at least one email saying, be careful of this email address that will try to penetrate your accounts.
This morning, I don't know if you heard it, they were talking about actually booking a holiday and not going through the normal, the TUIs and the Thomas Cooks, but if you're trying to book a holiday, say a flight, or you just want to book sort of the package yourself, and how much fraud there is, and these websites that just look identical to one of the major players, and they just take your money, and they send you the tickets through. If it's an airline, they'll send you your tickets. When you get to the check-in, not valid.
Can't wait for us to become again a barter trade society. in which we just exchange services. It's a lot safer.
Okay, so our next topic, who'd like to wade in this?
I think Dr. Mass has got a beamer.
I wanted to leave mine for the last because we started with climate change and this is about climate change again, so I'm not sure.
I can go.
Go on then.
Okay, it's an article I read in The Observer on Sunday, and for those of you who don't know, I'm a pharmacist by profession, and the headline of the article was CBD, a marijuana miracle or just another health fad? Now, basically what the article was about was how there's an increase in cannabis-derived products for sale, and I found this quite interesting because it's something which was not seemed favourable a few years ago, whereas now it was becoming a lot more out in the open and people are a lot more receptive to trying CBD products. Now, just a quick science lesson. It's the CBD, which they derive from hemp, is the non-psychotic chemical that helps with all types of conditions. It's the THC which causes the hallucinogenic effects from cannabis. They both have the same chemical structure, but they're just slightly built together differently. And what I found interesting was the amount of new products that are coming out. Now, I'll just go through a list, and you'll find these quite amazing, right? You can get like new CBD cosmetics, juices, coffees, sexual lubricants, pet products, ice creams, spring water, vodka, and cocktails. And it's something which people, like I said, didn't know about a few years ago, but all of a sudden now it's becoming a lot more open and people have been a lot more receptive to it. So I just wanted other people's thoughts on
and people products. Buying these things just because it says CBD on it, and
yes,
it's the buzzword.
Because at the moment, most of these sales have been taken online, but there's an increase of shops opening up selling purely CBD products. So it's a new fad which becoming a lot more out in the open. But
and I'm guessing the CBD in vodka or whatever is going to make no difference to the vodka or...
No, because the CBD, it's all natural, and it's been scientifically proven that there's no side effects to having the CBD.
Yeah.
If something has no side effects, can it have any effects?
That's the whole reason why there's coming these products, because what they have found is that it's good for a number of conditions and with no side effects whatsoever. And what they've noticed is that these CBDs work on a certain neurotransmitter which other medicines don't work on. So it's a whole new area which the companies are looking into. So it could be a new, new avenue for new medicines.
I think if you think about most of the commercial drugs all derived from something that could be made illegally to get a high as well, couldn't it? Whether it's an opiate or whatever.
I think it's interesting the debate about how much of the products does make a difference and how much is a marketing gimmick. Because nowadays there is a lot of that. And maybe the population do not have the actual maybe tools to sort that out, and they tend to buy the marketing aspect of this is good for the body of all them. So I would be interested in getting to know how much there is a real benefit to the product.
It's licensed, obviously it's under license.
Okay.
So how do these companies, probably naively, how do these companies actually manage to promote the... it's a fairly new product, so therefore what evidence have they got behind what they're claiming it can do? Some of these sort of very new
at the moment they're not allowed to make any medical claims on this product. But
you just read that list there.
Yeah, but unofficially they can't recommend that this will treat these conditions, but they can indirectly. And what they have done, they're running a few randomised controlled trials, giving some patients the CBD-based products and some patients just the placebo, and they found out in this case the CBD is working. Yeah, and especially when it comes to mental health, because when they prescribe antidepressants, and they come with a wide variety of side effects, which
and other uses generally, don't they? They can be used.
Yes. Whereas in this case, it's a natural product, and at the moment they haven't found no adverse side effects.
Interesting. I know if you go to Morocco, everything's with argan. It's going to cure everything. If you go to the Canaries, everything's aloe vera, isn't it? You know, they've all got their little.
In Argentina, it's mate.
But what's that?
It's a green. It's a kind of green tea and
oh yeah,
in a special pot.
Yeah, and in Peru they've got the cocoa, haven't they? In Peru they have the cocoa, which is supposed to help you with altitude sickness and has other impacts as well.
I think somebody should actually get all this stuff and mix it up in one great thing.
Every society needs their own soma, their own drug that make people believe that they're going to be better when they take it.
The health market is so huge, and everybody's looking for that elixir, aren't they? To make them better, or make them feel better, or to alleviate arthritis or aches and pains, and we're bombarded by it.
You're in the right business.
Hopefully,
yeah,
maybe. So only last week I saw a huge advertisement for energy drinks containing CBD oil. I think that's being released in the next few weeks. So it's one to look at.
It's going to be in everything, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know if Ashes will do a CBD tea masala. Yeah. Okay, who'd like to throw a news item in?
I've done it. Was in the Guardian. Government must raise taxes to plug the 3.6 billion social care funding shortfall, council says. And what they're saying is that they think it should come out of. There's a green paper we're all waiting for, this social green paper that has been put off by successive governments because nobody wants it. It's a hot potato. Nobody wants to deal with it. But they're actually saying there's a blueprint for reforming the sector, that income tax or national insurance increases should be considered. And of course that's not good news. If you're 35 and you've got a mortgage and you've still got student debt, suddenly you're now going to have to pay for older adults that, at 35 you think you're never going to be there. And it's very difficult. So what they're saying, it should be age 40 plus onwards. So a 65-year-old that may retire had still got to look at paying an increase in the national insurance. And it's how that is actually managed and people's perspective on growing older. But we are a growing older population, and just one thing, they reckon by 2026 they estimate there'll be one in 5 people in the world will be 65 and over, and number of 85s increased by 2/3. So in this country alone, our care sector is just creaking at the seams, and the money has got to come from somewhere, and it's not something that, say, any government particularly wants to manage. But people going to hospital and they're sitting in queues outside, and they look around them, and probably 2/3 of the people that are waiting to be seen are people in their 70s and above. And then when they are ready, if they're admitted to hospital, if they're lucky enough to be admitted to hospital, then they're bed block, which is a horrible term, but there's nowhere for them to go because there's not the care package available to send them home safely. There's no care homes for them to go to because the local authority haven't got the money to pay for it. And it's a huge issue for this country.
I think there's a bit of icing on the cake. Sorry, that's not a very good term. In other words, to make it worse, is that everybody's having to run harder in the workplace to keep going, and there isn't, like some communities, I don't know what it's like in Argentina, but I suspect there's more community people look after the elderly within family? Maybe. Am I right or wrong?
Yes. Yes.
Asian culture.
I agree. I see a difference. I see a big difference here in the UK, for instance, that in Argentina we all live like in the same place where the family is, and we want to be next to the family. I'm not, ironically, but while in England everything, or in the UK everything is more not so good centralized. So people live away from their family, and this affects how the dynamic of the society. And I see it because they are not so close to their beloved, and that it has a huge impact in our everyday life.
And in Germany, they've actually taken on the model and increased income tax by 2p per person, and that they're managing to sustain their adult social care and manage to look after people in the way that I suspect that any one of us would like to be looked after when we get to that age.
I think I was just going to say it's it's fact, isn't it? We are living longer. We're going to have to find a solution to this because people do need looking after, and I can't avoid looking at this challenge head on. But I think it's all about there's a pot of money and it's the way it's carved up. And I was looking at I'm doing some work at a university at the moment, and we're looking at sort of diabetes, type 2 diabetes, and just the amount of the government spend on diabetes every year, just because there's not enough going on in educating people when they're very young, or educating families on what to feed their kids, etc. The problem's getting bigger and bigger every year, and there's a huge amount to spend on it. And I think it's 1 in every 5 beds in hospitals are taken with issues to do with diabetes. And it's one of those where I think it's something like 60% of all cases, type 2 diabetes cases, are preventable. And it just strikes me that if we can sort something out that releases money to actually look after the elderly, I think it's always about this kind of interlinked way of kind of thinking and working. So that's how I'm thinking at the moment.
My point was also about the pot of money and how you divide it up. But have you ever heard the government say we can't afford to bomb that country because we haven't got enough money to do it? You never hear that, do you? It's a question of how people choose to spend the money. The government could choose to spend the money on social care. They choose to spend it somewhere else.
Well, I think that's one of the issues. I think if you're going to increase income tax and you would guarantee...
Well, that's what they're saying.
Guarantee that increase in income tax would only be spent. I mean, that's one thing. But you don't... I mean, nobody will ever convince me that road tax is spent on the bloody roads. No, never convince me.
There are virtually no taxes in this country that are deputed to a specific area.
Well, I want to resume what he mentioned, because I support universal health insurance. Like the people who are healthy can contribute to those who are not, and I totally support that idea. However, I do believe that in this society where people have there's been some kind of a very common, not very healthy habits, to mention smoking, for instance, and obesity and alcohol. Those are 3 things. So if something could be done to prevent, because that takes most of the budget from the NHS actually, and most of it, as you mentioned, can be prevented. So I think it is very important to make a strategy, and I'm not saying that we should punish those who are smokers, but we should find a way around it to encourage people to have a more healthy lifestyle.
That was actually one of the points, not using the word punish, but they did talk about to actually not support people who didn't want, that they were given the information to go off and actually live healthier, look after themselves, their diet, etc., etc. And if they didn't, then one strike and you're out. I mean, they basically were talking about that, which is very controversial.
Very, very, because you cannot not give support to them, and you cannot punish them. But I still think there could be some encouragement in a different way. It's a little bit like if you pay your car insurance, and if you are a more responsible driver, then you pay less, or if you have so. There could be some kind of incentive in that, just an incentive to have a health, not deny a health insurance, obviously.
Dr. Mass, you had a closing discussion point for us, I believe.
Oh, about the article?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yes. Well, I choose something very similar to, related to your article. It was about Cambridge University that agrees to explore fossil fuel divestment, and it's. But I like to think bigger. I always like to think. There's a magazine in Argentina that they talk about, instead of talking about politics, they talk about politics, but as if we were seeing this time of the history, but in 50 years or 100 years time. So it's an analysis that doesn't go into the small things. It goes into trying to see the big picture. And when I see this, and I see the big picture of this, what I see is hypocrisy. So I see vested interest and hypocrisy in a way that universities do a lot of research to prevent climate change, to find new technologies from renewable energy and carbon storage and other, but they are kind of subsidized by the companies who actually generate the climate change, and yes, the debate was open, and most of the academics signed a petition for a plan to divest, so I don't think there is such hypocrisy in academics, from the academics necessarily, but from the system and the management.
Thank you very much. Was that your climate change discussion topic?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. All right. Super. So you're saying that?
Sorry, did you?
Yeah. No. So you're saying that actually there's an agenda by the academics, maybe not consciously, to focus on certain things like climate change and carbon replacements, rather than maybe other pressing issues around the world.
Well, no. The academics generally. They don't necessarily choose what they focus on. It's more the funding that the government gives, and that actually derive what the researchers do research on. But what I mean is that I don't think academics on their own are necessarily accomplices of this hypocritical system. I do think that they are truly concerned about climate change.
So what important factors are perhaps not being looked at because they're not being driven by government through academia?
Sorry again?
So if the focus is all on climate change, what other areas that could be studied and answers found for are being missed, do you think?
Well, no, I don't think it's about diverting the focus on climate change. But I think it's about not having fossil fuel companies investing in academia, in institutions, in educational institutions. So the institutions invest in fossil fuels companies.
Yeah.
So it's hypocritical because they are on the one way trying to fight climate change, and on the other way they are financed by those companies.
I've seen a television advert recently where the young family are decorating a bedroom and it's Shell. Have you seen the advert? And the young family are there. I'd like my things there, this there, and this there. And the girl said, well, where does the electricity come from? And Shell are suggesting that all of the electricity that they're going for is sourced from renewable sources. So do they not have a duty and for instance, the lack of hypocrisy for the climate change, to change their model, because at some stage it will run out and they won't have the oil and things like that. So surely, if they are funding the academics to find new ways of delivering our energy, which ultimately we will live and die on, if there was a terrorist attack, it would be more damaging if they took away our electricity than they dropped a bomb, because everything would stop. Our hospitals would stop, our funding would stop, our banking would stop, our lives would cease. There would then be civil and martial law. So they wouldn't have to kill people, they would just have to take away our internet and our electricity, and then that would be the catalyst. So is it not hypocritical for the fossil fuel companies to increase their money spent to academics to find a better way now, rather than sit on their laurels and wait for their stash
just to run out,
to deplete? I'm not.
It's a good point.
I'm not saying it's wrong.
No, it's a very good point, and a very good point. I haven't thought about that in that way. I think the fossil fuels in general, they invest in renewable energies and research, but they could do more. But yeah, it's a very good point.
Okay, now I've got a final story from Harry here to draw the meeting to a close.
I thought I'd give Geraldine a bit of hope. And I thought it'd give us all a bit of hope, but actually total inspiration. And if you know all this, forgive me, I'm going to read the column. But I just think it's just impressive. It's a business run by an 88-year-old and a 95-year-old. And it's doing it some. So, Warren Buffett, he bought Berkshire Hathaway, which was a struggling Rhode Island textile business in 1965. Berkshire stopped making textiles because it wasn't working 20 years later, by which time Mr. Buffett was using the company as a vehicle to invest in other businesses. To this end, he bought insurance companies and used the premiums that they collected as a cash pool with which to make a series of investments. Duracell, the battery maker, the Fruit of the Loom, the clothing company are among the 90 or so companies that Berkshire owns. It also has large stakes in Coca-Cola, American Express and Goldman Sachs. Among other Berkshire employees, it's only got 26 people in Berkshire. It only employs 26 at its head office in Omaha, Nebraska. But the companies it owns have nearly 390,000 people on their payrolls. It is valued at $537 billion, and at the last count, Mr. Buffett owns 16.5% of Berkshire Hathaway, which is a stake worth $89 billion. He's the world's third wealthiest person. Mr. Buffett has promised to give all of his Berkshire shares to charity when he dies, and has already donated $31 billion to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and 4 other charities. He's lived in the same 5-bedroom house in Omaha, which is worth $886,000. Many Berkshire shareholders have been made very rich by the company's success. So if you'd invested $10,000 in 1964, and I appreciate that was quite a lot of money, that should be with inflation worth today about $350,000. It's not with Berkshire Hathaway, it's worth $170 million. And he says, we came a long way from a very small beginning, says Charlie Munger, the 95-year-old vice chairman. Anyway.
Great business story to finish up on. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we didn't get round to everybody with your stories. This is, I'm sure, an activity you can do another time. Big thank you to Ashes for hosting us today. If you've not dined at Ashes, Solihull or Birmingham, you're missing out. They regularly win Curry House or Indian Restaurant of the Year at the National Curry Awards, so we're delighted to have them here in Touchwood. Thank you to you guys for giving up your time this afternoon for Intelligence Forums, and we look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Tony.
You're listening to Solihull Radio.